Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Alexandra Porter. I'm very excited to be here today to introduce and moderate our webinar that'll be exploring the importance of strong leadership and how Colleen Wright-Riva from University of Maryland used hers to craft a strong vision for her self-operated dining program. Just a few housekeeping notes before we jump in. If any questions come up that you would like addressed during the length of this webinar, please send an email to David or Colleen, and they will respond promptly after the webinar has completed. So let's jump in. I'd like to introduce our host for today. We have H. David Porter, who's an author and CEO of Porter Consulting. We have Colleen Wright-Riva, who's the Director of Dining Services from University of Maryland, and myself, Alexandra Porter, Associate at Porter Consulting. So I'm going to hand it off to David and we're going to get started.
Great. Thank you, Alex. For those of you who may not be familiar, our company, we're independent strategic planning and design firm for college and universities serving North America. We've probably had in excess of 400 college and university engagements. We've pioneered some next generation dining and learning, a couple of dozen campuses around the country. And we've also coined the phrase social architecture. It was part of the book we published about 6 years ago. And we'll explain what that means as we get into this conversation with Colleen. So to set the stage or set the backdrop to this, back in the spring of 2015, in the wake of the Great Recession, of course, that's the Great Recession of 2008. So we were kind of on the back end of it, coming out of it, but that's kind of where we were. And at the same time, the state of Maryland was extending state budget and salary cuts to the university system. So that was the backdrop of when Colleen first reached out to me and we started to have a conversation about opportunities to work together on her campus. Colleen, would you like to just mention how this unfolded on campus with Grant Thornton?
Sure. Thank you, David. Hello, everybody. So yes, the University of Maryland, like a lot of other schools, was trying to dig itself out of a pretty, deep financial hole because of the Great Recession. And one of the things that our university leadership wanted to do was they wanted to explore campus-wide efficiency. And they did that through bringing on a consultant. Many of you have probably heard of them, Grant Thornton. And their scope was really the entire campus. They went pretty much department by department, division by division. And we're looking at ways to suggest to the university leadership that things could be more efficient or effective in a different, perhaps, style of running the campus. So there certainly was some concern by me that they were going to focus in on dining services. And that's when I really wanted to talk with David a little bit about a strategy to almost have a good defense and then take the offense when they came a calling. So that's really where the campus was at in this effort.
So during our discussions with Colleen, and Colleen basically said to us, I've got two primary objectives here, kind of with that as a backdrop with the efficiency study going on around campus. Colleen has a successful and has continued to build a successful self-operated dining department, but she knew that there probably would be some investigation about what might be the best form of management for her particular department. And as she just mentioned, she wanted to get out in front of it. So one of the first things she said is, David, we need to develop a self-op versus contract evaluation. And we're kind of uniquely, I think, positioned to be able to help inform that, because not only over the past 25 years as a company and 30 years as a consultant have we and I worked on many campuses that are self-operated, but also in the past 10 years, we've developed in excess of 50 contracts where we worked on behalf of a university to facilitate the RFP process. So we have a lot of real data based on the bids that came in, the financial metrics, how they would typically respond, what really is a contract worth versus self-op. And the second was to develop a strategic plan that would really help coalesce, define, project and establish Colleen's vision to create even more value for the department. One of the really big concerns that Colleen had about the self-op versus contract evaluation had to do with the way the University of Maryland's dining services support department is structured. And Colleen, could you just explain that a little bit and why that's an aberration? I know when we did our initial report, I think I said at that time, the 300 campuses we'd been on, we had not seen another campus that had a department structured the way yours has been structured.
Sure, and I wonder yet if you have found another since then, but I think
We have
not.
not.
So the University of Maryland is incredibly decentralized, and the Department of Dining Services has many, if not all of the functions that would typically belong in a divisional auxiliary environment. So as a quick example, I don't know of any other school besides Maryland that has an entire dining services facilities team. And when I say that, I'm not talking a few people, I'm talking almost 40 people. So I have plumbers, carpenters, HVAC specialists. So they're all in the dining portfolio. In addition to that, I have an entire business function team and an IT team that does its own programming. So those things are typically at a divisional level, and they add a significant labor cost in our model. And I knew that Grant Thornton or anybody else coming in and looking at this without understanding how we're set up would wonder what the heck's going on with the labor costs and why does this model look so different than anything else.
And in fact, if the school did contract out, or looking at the pros and cons of contracting, that I think it was almost $5 million a year, at least give or take, that you were actually covering and still generating a profit or a positive form of remuneration back to the university. Those wouldn't go away. Those would just get shifted back to the institution. So we wanted to make sure we did an apples for apples comparison to determine and to be able to present exactly how much that the department was contributing to the institution directly and indirectly. So we'll talk a little bit about our process that Colleen embraced and approved. The first step in our process was to really get to learn what is unique about her department and the culture, the philosophy, and also how it's structured organizationally. And that really took a series of face-to-face stakeholder meetings back when face-to-face was a thing before Zoom, but way before Zoom. But so we went to campus and we sat with the university administrators, not only Colleen, but her senior management and some of the unit managers and the line staff as well. We talked to the folks in housing. There's clearly an effect in terms of the value proposition of housing and how dining, what role dining plays in that. Is dining perceived as an amenity? Is it perceived as a negative as it relates to the value of housing? Admissions, what role does dining play with admissions in terms of when students come to campus to tour the campus, how do they view the dining program? Is it viewed as a positive or a negative? We want them to obviously check that box as a positive, but also in an institution like the University of Maryland College Park, there were lots of friends and sometimes family members that had already gone through and received their education, or they were a couple of years in. So they were also telegraphing back information about what a new incoming student should or shouldn't do, especially as it related to dining. Enrollment, residence life, the quality of resident life on campus for undergrads and for underclassmen, upperclassmen, graduate students, and also the business services. So we really took a super deep dive in terms of collecting that information as part of our qualitative research. The next step was to really evaluate the concept and the program strategies. So we looked at things like menu variety and selection, methods of service, food production capabilities, hours of operation, Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday, payment methods, takeout opportunities, and additional revenue opportunities. So Colleen, could you kind of set the stage a little bit in terms of what your program used to be like with the à la carte approach to service, the takeout, and those declining balanced meal plans?
Sure. So our campus had a 40-year history of doing a la carte. And that really meant that in our two very large dining halls, students would come in breakfast, lunch, dinner, and late night, and everything they purchased was priced out for them. So, you know, we were charging $1.59 for the soda and $3 for the hamburger. We had about 50% of our students choose to take their food out with them. So we had a lot of packaging going on as well. And for me, one of the really disheartening things about that style of service was that we had, in my mind, we had no community. And we also had, although we had a lot of menu variety, it wasn't the kind of variety I thought students were looking for. It was things that we knew would, you know, serve them well if they carried them out. But we didn't have a lot of opportunity to do some more of the healthier foods because students weren't willing to try them. They wanted to, you know, they were paying for everything they were choosing, and they weren't necessarily willing to take a chance on something new and exciting and different, because if they didn't like it, they thought they wasted their money. So that environment really wasn't working well for us, and we got feedback that suggested that.
Right. And the hours of operation actually were quite extensive. 7 a.m. to what, 1 a.m., 7 days a week, Colleen?
7 a.m. to midnight.
Midnight, excuse me, midnight. So pretty extensive. Our third step was to look at the meal plans, do an analysis and develop strategies, review the existing meal plans, propose alternative meal plans with no price increase. That was our goal anyway, to look at not increasing the price of the meal plans to students, whatever form it took, develop a revenue forecast, and also recommend the optimum phasing in of the proposed meal plans. And the work we've done over the past 30 years, I mean, I know everybody's probably heard this in one form or another, where students might be concerned about the price of room and board, or even complaining about the price of the meal plans. And often, and I'm going to flip back to the previous slide, looking at what we call the program and the strategies, the menu, the hours of operation, the methods of service, et cetera, combined with the meal plans, is really constitutes a value proposition. I've often said, if any of us were to go to a store and we were charged $2.50 for something, but we didn't think it was worth it for whatever reason, we would consciously or unconsciously deem that price too expensive. Well, on a much grander scale, we see the same thing with meal plans. So we really wanted to know how they worked and how they didn't work. And Colleen, could you just describe a little bit, we don't have to really get too granular about it, but the construct of your meal plans? They were declining balance, but there was a little overhead. There were a couple of component parts to them.
Right. So each dining plan started out with a set number of resident points and a set number of dining dollars. And before we actually gave that set number of meals, points and dollars, we also had an overhead charge that was built into it. You know, this is many years ago, but so I'll just make this up. But let's say the dining plan cost $2,000. We knew that we needed to have at least $500 of that set aside. So the student was getting $1,500 distributed in the way of resident points for dining halls and dining dollars for our convenience stores and our cafes. And what we did see happen, David, and no surprise to you, because I know you've been talking about this for years, is we did see students run out of money, and they ran out of resident points to use in the dining halls because we were charging them for every single experience.
And we did have a chance during those qualitative interviews to talk to some student leaders and some students, and they did mention that, Colleen, as you know, because you were there, some of them would talk about how really when it got to crunch time with finals is when it got to crunch time with how many points they had left. So some of them would say, you know, in addition to the stress of final exams, they were trying to figure out, how do I stretch my points to get through the end of the semester so I don't run out? And there was that rare occasion where students would have some money left over as well. And to the point about the overhead, the $500 of overhead, it also wasn't lost on some of the students that if they just took $2,000 in cash and spent it in an a la carte location, they'd get more buying power than if they bought a meal plan. So it was really helpful to start getting this kind of feedback so we could look at the construct of the meal plans, the value propositions. Certainly at the same time, we're very attuned to the financial consequences of whatever direction we go in.
Right.
And that was
David,
really embodied by the development of a 5-year financial projection where we put together a very detailed, granular revenue and operating expense projection, the direct and indirect operating expenses, developed financial implications for the support services to include them and to not include them in terms of what the self-op is covering and what it would be if it was a contract and what the university would still have to cover, but it wouldn't be reflected in a food service contract with an operator. Also staffing matrices where for each of the locations, we developed based on the hours of operation and the staffing of each of the platforms, what that would look like with wages, benefits, hourly and annualized.
David,
And
can I jump in for a minute?
please.
I just want to, kind of also set the stage that for me, one of the reasons that your analysis was so important was because what I've just painted this picture for, keep in mind, everything was working. We were very profitable and we were able to cover all those extra expenses that we talked about that I have that a lot of other schools don't have. And so there was a lot of kind of concern on the campus about, well, nothing's truly broken. So, really make sure you're going down this right path. So having the financial model is really important to show that we could make this change and still have all those financial pieces work.
Right. And so we had three locations, two primary locations, the diner, which was is a very large at that time, a la carte location for resident students, in a location near most of the underclassmen. South dining, same concept, same approach, near the apartments for the upperclassmen. And that was all a la carte. And Colleen, could you just describe what 251 North was?
Sure. 251 North is a dining hall that's a little bit more removed than the other two primary dining halls. And we had decided to put our toe in the water of all you care to eat, since South Campus and the diner were both retail. And we added a feature in each dining plan to allow students to have one meal per week at the 251 North dining hall. And we really wanted to see if there was interest in all you care to eat, and we wanted to see if students would go that far, because again, it's a little further off campus. So it's a little bit of an anomaly in the picture. And yeah, so that's it. So David, does that answer the question?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
And then also we were looking at demand calculations in terms of, we were formulating how many students based on what recommendations were being developed for the methods of service, the hours of operation, the menu variety and selection. What would the projected demand be for the peak period? So is there enough square footage? Is there enough capacity in the servery to serve all those students? Are there enough seats in the dining room to seat all those students? If you remember, Colleen mentioned earlier in the presentation that 50% of the students, give or take, were taking out food. So if we went to a different form of service where basically they were encouraged to stay and eat, are these facilities even big enough to accommodate that particular demand? And if there are requirements to renovate, expand, reduce the size of the dining room, the servery, the kitchen, what are the preliminary capital cost estimates associated with those proposed recommendations? Then we went back to, we formulated all this information, we put it together. We like to characterize this as an interactive work session, as opposed to just presenting recommendations. So we had actually I think a number of large meetings with Colleen and her staff where we presented our findings and then we presented recommendations or proposed strategies based on those findings. And we really do encourage feedback, pushback, either at the end of the meeting or during the meeting, or within a couple of days or however long it takes for the school to kind of reconvene and put together a list of concerns or issues that we either have to do a better job of defending, or because maybe of some political or financial realities, some of these strategies might need to be adjusted in a particular way so that, in this case, Colleen and her team could embrace them and move forward successfully. So one of the biggest ideas that Colleen had, and is something that's near and dear to our heart, is anytime dining. I thought I would, this is a lot of words. I typically don't put this in a presentation, but I thought I would just read it because I think there's a lot of confusion between all you care to eat and anytime dining. So let me just try to do this quickly. Anytime dining is not all you care to eat or a la carte. Anytime dining is a next generation solution that is mission critical to deliver a rich and unforgettable, quote, the college experience, unquote. It's a centerpiece of a successful, quote, freshman experience, unquote, and a high quality residential life program, and fosters the highest levels of student engagement and student academic success. It programmatically combines specially designed anytime dining access plans, kind of synonymous to a health club membership, granting all access privileges to a student engagement commons designed to encourage students to serendipitously connect and socially engage with one another, relax, network, play, study, collaborate, problem solve, and recharge themselves and their devices in a safe, wholesome, in this case, 17 hours a day, 17 days a week, 7 days a week, and on-campus environment. These venues feature made-to-order fresh, local, sustainable, high-quality foods, offering a full and complete selection of all foods constantly and consistently throughout all of the 17 hours a day that they're open. Students enrolled in anytime dining plans may come and go as they please, choose to eat as much or as little as they choose during those hours of operation. And it is the only next generation approach that completely eliminates food insecurity for all of the students enrolled in an anytime dining or a mandatory anytime dining meal plan, guaranteeing that access to the student engagement anytime dining venues will never run out or expire before the end of the semester, or come up short, or have any money left over. And I'll just add, they will never have to call home to mom and dad to get money to fill the gaps in a program if the hours are limited or if the venue's open but the menu is limited. Anytime dining participants will never have to be insidiously taxed by being forced to supplement or add money from parents' financial aid, personal savings, or shop, cook, and clean up for their meals after enrolling in the new, in this case, University of Maryland College Park anytime dining program. So we made that recommendation with a lot more detail, but that was the gist of it. And the results of the self-op V contract financial analysis based on the direction, the very successful program that Colleen had already established, combined with her vision on how she wanted to move forward after it was embraced by what was presented, was that approximately there would be a $300 million level of remuneration of money back to the institution over the next 20 years. And we basically confirmed that there would not be a food service management company that would come close to being able to provide the program, the level of program, the quality of service at the prices that were set by the institution and generate that level of return. So Colleen, when this was received, did this pretty much seal the deal for the self-op to continue?
It did. I mean, I think, I can tell you that I was really fortunate that my vice president of student affairs always believed in self-op, and really, that was her line in the sand, that this would not ever be a contract school. But you have a president and other vice presidents and Grant Thornton saying there are opportunities out there to capture all this money. So having this validation absolutely helped our vice president go to the president's cabinet of all the other vice presidents and kind of make that claim and share this information. And it made a huge difference. Absolutely.
So, and then after we presented that, Colleen asked us to put together an anytime, the framework for an anytime dining implementation timeline and strategy, which she actually worked with her team to refine and work out all the component parts of it over the coming year, and then implemented the program a year later. So Colleen, let's, if you could talk for a few minutes here about some of the benefits, the intended consequences of your vision for anytime dining. And now that you've got a few years under your belt of having implemented this program, certainly maybe share with us some examples of how successful it's been.
Sure. So I can tell you that we had about 5 things we really wanted to have happen with this decision to move from a retail environment to anytime dining. And there's no particular order, but I will start with the one that was most near and dear to my heart, which is solving food insecurity. We knew that there were students that were running out of points and did not have enough to eat and were eating sometimes only 1 or 2 meals a day. And that was really troubling to me as a parent and as a longtime member of the campus community. It just troubled me. So we were able to absolutely resolve that issue, and students have unlimited access, as David mentioned. So
Colleen, do you want me to move up to those letters that you included here?
Oh, sure, if you want to. I didn't know if they were actually in the final thing here. Sorry, I didn't mean to get out of order here. I think this is really telling, and this speaks to a student that wrote to me. One of the catalysts for this change, all the things David and I have talked about were there, but this letter brought me to tears, and I have read it many times over the years, and it has almost always choked me up, because you can see that this student is saying, all that I want is to be able to eat a normal amount of meals, even just 2 meals a day, which I do not think is too much to ask for. The student says, I don't even eat very much. And at 7:30 at night, I've eaten a single meal. The last meal I ate was at noon, and I was burdened by the decision to go further in debt with my meal points or to starve. Not only has this affected my classroom performance for obvious reasons, but I'm having trouble sleeping. And 5 hours from now, after I finish with all my homework, I'll have to try to go to sleep starving, knowing that my next meal will not come for at least 12 hours. And I'm actually getting choked up now, so I'm going to stop. But again, as a parent and as the director who had a lot of pride in a lot of things we were doing, but knew that this was always a problem, kind of the Grant Thornton looking at our campus and my own awareness that this was just like, I had enough. I read this letter, I got this letter, I took it to our vice president, and at one point I even said, even if the campus can't support this, I'm going to push ahead and take my chances. No matter what happens, this is the right thing to do. So this letter.
Colleen, let me just add real quick. 3 or 4 years ago, I attended an intercession that you did, and everybody in the room was brought to tears, including myself, when you read this. And then there was another letter you read. But as a consultant, I really wasn't dialed into the fact that food insecurity for resident students living on campus with mandatory meal plans was a thing. And this really opened my eyes to that. So first of all, thank you. And also congratulations on your success. Here, this is the next letter right here after you implemented the new program.
Yeah, and so, we implemented the program, and the letter that I just read, or part of it, I had gotten many like that, that people didn't have enough money. And I had spoken with a parent who did not have a lot of confidence. I told her I was trying to change the program, and I had to work through kind of the bureaucratic things on campus. And then after I did change the program, she wrote me this lovely letter. And I keep both of these letters always, and you can see it right there. I don't think you would remember me, but I emailed and spoke with you last year about my son, Justin, having difficulty with the food plan. You were very understanding and open to hearing what we were experiencing and hoping to make change. I didn't hold out much hope for that change, but I write today to thank you for all that you did to make changes in the experience. I felt that I owed you a thank you. We're too quick to complain when the problem is fixed. We forget to thank those responsible. I love the last part of this paragraph. Her son is able to drink milk with his meals, which was something he couldn't afford to do last year. He even had us take the extra food we brought him back home because he didn't need it. So you can see this validation. Again, if I read these back to back, I get very emotional. So, but I'm sure you've had a chance to just read it as we're talking now. But it's just an amazing transformation for our students. And I have never received another letter like the first one since we moved to anytime dining. So absolutely resolved that issue for us.
So Colleen, let me go back to these other slides, and,
Sure.
and maybe you could just touch on these a little bit.
Sure.
How this affected your vision once it was implemented. How did it affect the campus dynamics?
Yeah, so, there were other objectives as well. We certainly wanted to build community on our campus. We wanted to see value and satisfaction go up. We wanted to improve our sustainability footprint, and we needed to be more financially, responsible. We were always doing great, but we wanted to do better. And all of those things, those outcomes happened with our decision to go to Anytime Dining. So we had these 5 catalysts, and all of them were realized. Student participation and satisfaction. We were a school that, again, we had a retail program, and we had some critical feedback from students that our menu variety wasn't what it could be, our pricing wasn't great, and they hated running out of points. So our satisfaction has only gone up every year since we've done this. Our NACUPS benchmarking has improved. Our own internal surveys that we do have improved. Our feedback from students and parents has improved when they come to visit us. So that's absolutely been amazing. The other wonderful thing is on the sustainability front, we were able to, as I mentioned earlier, 50% of our students were taking their food to go. And when we added up the number of pieces of packaging that we saved with this change, it was 6.3 million pieces of packaging every year that we stopped wasting, that are no longer going into the landfill because we don't have that carry-out element anymore. So that has been a huge, just our footprint on campus has changed, our relationship with students and that they see how much we care about the environment has changed. The other thing is that we were able to modify the menus enough and let students experience new foods that we were able to join the Menus of Change Research Collaborative. And it is driving a lot of our menu decisions that is helping the planet in other ways and helping student health. So the sustainability piece has perhaps been as critical to me as the food insecurity, and they both just, it's been amazing. And then on the revenue growth, I keep going back to it because I am so proud of the team that we always were financially stable, but we did indeed see the revenue growth that David had mentioned. Our revenue change in the first year of doing this was about a $5 million positive swing in revenue in terms of our program, and much of that went to the bottom line. So we were able to increase our plant fund savings, and it has allowed us to do a lot of other things on campus as well. The other very interesting thing is David had said to us during this process that we would grow voluntary meal plans, and we have thousands of apartment beds right within a quarter mile to a half a mile, even closer perhaps, some of them, to our campus, and we really hadn't captured that market. Our first year of Anytime Dining was slow. I think students needed to see some validation and hear their on-campus friends talk about the program and invite them in with their guest meals. But through the last 3 years, we have seen our voluntary meal plans grow. We are over 2,000 plans. That's pre-COVID, of course. And it generated last year an extra $2.5 million in revenue for us just in these voluntary apartment plans. The last thing I think here on the slide that kind of has come as an outcome of all of our work is that we've been able to focus some resources and hire some dedicated team members to look at food insecurity more broadly. We've partnered with other departments on our campus to really get a look under the hood. And what we found is that of 4,900 students answered our survey, 20% of them were reporting to have very low or low food security. Most of them are the off-campus community. Most of them are, we're seeing a lot in the graduate population, but we're now in a place where we can start looking at that audience too and trying to solve that problem for ourselves. Where in the past, that was always going to be more about our residential students. Now we're able to focus elsewhere. And with all the wonderful changes that have happened over the last 4 years, we've been really fortunate to be able to continue to save in our, what we call our plant fund or our our facilities fund, and we have gotten approval before COVID, and we're going to still continue on. The shovels are in the ground to build a new dining hall and 2 new residence halls. That will be the first new dining hall in over 50 years on our campus, because the campus had not typically wanted to spend money on these types of initiatives. So I think all this positive energy has really helped us sell a story. And a really important story for how students live and experience their campus environment. So we're scheduled to open in the fall of 22, and I'm very excited about that as well.
And Colleen, a lot of the inquiries we get today too is, what is the future of dining going to look like as we're in the midst of this COVID crisis? And we've got a number of clients that have engaged to really look at what their program should be fall 2021, fall 2022. One of them's fall 2024. And I think the short term is that we're still in the midst of this, day-to-day uncertainty. Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse before it gets better? But I think the conventional wisdom is, at least the scientists, that hopefully by this time next year, we'll be looking in the rear view mirror because of vaccines and therapies that get produced in the spring and hopefully get distributed widely throughout the United States. And by the fall of 2022, it should be even more distant. But having had this experience, there'll still be some behavioral probably changes and concerns. But to be able to still have that social connectivity, that social architecture that I mentioned earlier, and the social architecture is really the intentional programming and design of facilities that are done in a way that draws students together to create a richer experience and environment, and do it more frequently on a day-to-day basis throughout the academic year. Because we have learned there is a causal relationship that transcends dining that does affect recruitment, the admissions, acceptance yield numbers. It does affect in a positive way student retention, fall freshman to fall sophomore, in a positive way. Students that eat and dine on campus tend to have higher average GPAs and higher graduation rates than those who don't. But we also want to bake into the kind of the design, the ability to pivot between, self-serve and staff-served, and communal dining and takeout, and making better use of cashless mobile platforms that students can use when during normal times, but also during times if we have to pivot back and forth, just to have that in. Hopefully we're not going to see this again for another 100 years, but everybody's going to be concerned about it. So to have those fail-safe systems kind of baked into the programming solutions in the future is what we're seeing and working with. And the architects we've worked with too are doing the same for housing and dining.
I think that's really a great point. Our building is pretty much going to be the way it is, David, because we were well into the design and process before COVID. But we are trying to think creatively about, all right, what happens if we open in the fall of 22 and we still don't have the confidence to do a self-serve salad bar? How will we do that? So we're starting to think about this beautiful salad bar that's designed into this space. And how we're going to make it still exciting if we have to do a served environment. So we're thinking about all that in all of our stations.
Right. Actually, Colleen, Melanie just asked a question. What is the minimum volume or student population to make anytime dining financially feasible? I can just in general share that we've developed anytime dining programs on campuses with less than 1,000 students. We've worked at a couple of campuses in North Dakota where one campus had, I think, 300 resident students and another had about 400 or 500 resident students. And there were a number of commuter students. In terms of the hours of operation, how extensive does the anytime dining go? That would be anytime dining from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., possibly 10. We've developed anytime dining from 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning till midnight, and we've developed 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Usually for the 24/7, we're looking at a population of at least 1,200 resident students. That would be probably 1,000 to 1,200 would be the minimum. Give or take. What would your response to that be, Colleen?
I think I would agree with you. I mean, I've worked here and at Cornell, and we had resident populations of about 10,000 at both schools. So that's what I'm familiar with. And it certainly works. The model works very well for a large school, but I'd have to imagine that it would work equally as well for a small school. Right. So I don't know that there's a threshold. I think I would, rely on your expertise of all the schools you've partnered with.
And I mean, I think it creates the ultimate value proposition for the students too, meaning the program combined with the meal plans. When we survey students about meal plans, when campuses are struggling with, are our meal plans too expensive? Should we have declining balance? Should we have blocks per semester? Should we have 19, 14, and 10 per week? You know, how should that shake out, David? And usually the greatest value, when you look at the value proposition, we don't ask students, do they think the meal plans are too expensive? We say, is the program combined with the meal plans an excellent, a good, a fair, a poor value? I mean, value is an emotion. Do they feel like they're getting a good deal? And usually what we find is when the value proposition is inferior, and that can consist of limited hours, limited menu variety and selection, limited operating days. I mean, there are some schools that don't serve dinner on Sunday nights, or they close for a couple of hours on Saturday and Sunday afternoon. Some don't open till 10 in the morning or 11 on Saturday or Sunday. So, you know, when the value of that lined up against the meal plan price, that usually is what we find to be the issue. And for residential dining, which by the way can potentially be open to everybody, it's not just resident students. We did a project for the University of Ottawa, and they had Patrick Genest at the University of Ottawa told us they had between 500 and 800 commuter students. Now, of course, the campus had 50,000 students and 2,000 were resident. They had plenty of food courts on campus too, but the venue that was 24/7 anytime dining for lunch, they were serving between 500 and 800 commuter students who paid the door rate over and above the cash door rate, over and above the students that were on meal plans. So this is something that has potentially, if it's done properly, universal appeal. So,
Yeah, David, I'll quickly jump in and say that our campus is notorious for faculty and staff doing the brown bag and not participating in dining. And those that did, though, really liked our old retail environment, so they could come sit in the dining room, but just get a small salad for $2. And all of a sudden, you know, our door price is much more now because it's all you care to eat in this anytime environment. And we had a lot of pushback. But once we invited them in for the first time with a complimentary meal, I tell you what, we have won them all back and more. And we now have several hundred that are on faculty staff dining plans. And they look forward to and come in and have their meals in the anytime dining halls.
that's great. So we'll just conclude. This really, in my mind, sums it up. Strong leadership matters. And Colleen certainly embodied that when back in the spring of 2015, again, just emerging from and not even quite out of it yet, that Great Recession, with the state continuing to extend salary and budget cuts to the university system for the state of Maryland that Colleen certainly had to live under, and the university hiring a nationally known company to do efficiency studies. Colleen didn't wait and react to whatever the school presented. She really decided to be proactive to the best, I guess, defense is a good offense. And that's exactly the approach Colleen took. And so again, Colleen, congratulations on all your success. And I know you probably feel uncomfortable when I attribute all this to you, but, and you've got a great team, an amazing team.
Yeah.
But congratulations. And any final thoughts, Colleen?
Well, I'll just say thank you, but I certainly will say that it was a monumental effort by the entire team to make this happen, but it was so worthwhile. And I can tell you absolutely that even though I instinctively knew this was the right path, right? I've been a director now for over 20 years. There is a real value in having an outside set of eyes come and validate your thinking. And it really matters to leadership, because you can tell vice presidents and your president all day long that you know what you're talking about. And they may want to believe you, but when they see it from an external source like David, and they see the efforts that were put into this process and all of the financial analysis and the implementation strategy, it makes a difference. So any school that's kind of thinking about that, I would tell you it is absolutely well worth it to have that external validation. It made a huge difference for us, and I suspect it would for everybody. So I appreciate the hard work that Porter did with us, and it absolutely helped us on our path.
Thanks, Colleen. As Alex mentioned at the kickoff to this, if you do have any more questions, please don't hesitate to email Colleen or email me. We will respond to your questions. Or if you'd like to have a discussion to kind of review the pros and cons of anytime dining, or as Melanie mentioned, what kind of a critical mass do we need to get started here to make it viable? We will also send everybody a link to the recording for this webinar that you'll have to view and share as you wish. And again, Colleen, thank you. Congratulations on all of your success. And I really appreciate your willingness to take the time to put this together. It really is a tremendous success story. And again, congratulations. So any last words, Colleen?
I just say thank you. It was my pleasure, and absolutely reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd be happy to talk more about it to anyone that wants some detail.
Okay. Thank you, Colleen, and thank you everybody for attending. Make it a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.